and I'm here to introduce today's speakers. Come on in. Like church, you have to sit in front. So
like school, I'll sit
there you go, absolutely. So here's a couple of comments that I'd just like to share. Inextricably linked to the production of energy is the capacity to store it. And that's what, in a sustainable way, we need to be looking at. So today's speakers are focused on energy storage systems, what they are, how they work, and how they can become part of our homes and our lives. We are honored with two supremely knowledgeable and qualified presenters this morning. So Ed Kranich is a senior manager for the incentive programs as part of the Connecticut Green Bank. He joined the incentives program team in 2012 at the launch of the Residential Solar Investment Program and manages its operations, program design, and data analytics. And among his current areas of focus is energy storage systems for homes, thus today. A man of many talents, Dr. Roger Kuhns is a writer, filmmaker, performer, geologist, and founder of Sustain Audit LLC. He's a sustainable practices application company based in Mystic, Connecticut. I want to follow up a little bit about what that all entails and how you can get involved. Roger also serves as a volunteer lobbyist at the Citizens Climate Lobby, a nonprofit group garnering support in Congress for national carbon fee and dividend legislation. And he is a practitioner, owner of solar panels, a battery storage system, and an electric vehicle. So this session will conclude at 10:50. I'll be the watcher of the clocks. And so you can be in place for the 11 o'clock session. Note that room C right next door will be a conversation room where follow-ups might continue on. So thank you here for being here. Thank you for your interest in this highly relevant and timely global issue that is first and forefront on our minds. So gentlemen, it's a privilege that I turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming. Feel free to take a seat.
I think, Ed, can you use the microphone? I think
Oh, yeah.
For the video and I think for the people.
Oh, sure.
Get a few more seats.
Where's my?
I don't know.
I didn't think we would need it, but that machine's pretty loud.
This is just for the. Just talk loud.
Okay, I'll just talk loud. If you can't hear, just ask me to speak up. All right, so thanks. So thanks everyone for coming today. It's a pretty impressive turnout for 10 a.m. on a Saturday, so love to see it. So I'm Ed Kranich with the Connecticut Green Bank, joined here by Dr. Roger Kuhns. So we'll be splitting our time here.
A little louder.
Trying to project here.
Yes, the mic. Are they not working?
We don't know where it is.
It's right there in front of you.
Not this one. There's another one back there.
Well, this goes to the camera as
Oh,
well.
that goes to the camera.
I don't know. They didn't have one, so.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Well, I'll speak loudly
keep
until,
going since we
until
only
they
have
can
someone.
come with a mic. And there's some seats up front too if you're having trouble hearing. So we'll be talking today about energy storage. So our agenda for today, we're going to talk about why does the grid need energy storage, why does Connecticut need energy storage, and why would you be interested in having it. Then we'll get into batteries 101, how they work and how they work with solar panels especially. And then Roger's going to talk a little bit about where batteries come from and the sustainability of having a battery. We'll do a little bit about the incentives available from the Connecticut Green Bank and from the utilities for battery storage, and then we'll get into questions. So seeing that we have a lot of people here, we'll try to leave at least 15 minutes or so for questions. Oh, perfect. Does this help? Can you hear? Okay, all right, great. All right, so why does Connecticut need energy storage? Well, the first reason on people's minds is usually power outages. So we see longer and more frequent outages than in the past. While the weather this past year has been kind for the most part, in Connecticut, the summers of 2020 and 2021 are still raw in my mind. I was out of power for several days up in South Windsor when we had a lot of thunderstorms. We had hurricanes. With climate change and increasing temperatures and increasing severity of storms, we want to be prepared for these things. So I have some these reminder headlines up here, and a couple that were a little bit more recent, like with a couple weeks ago when we had that nor'easter come in. They were expecting power outages. Thankfully, we didn't get too many of them. But it's something that we need to prepare for in the future. So folks need to have resilience for when the grid goes down. The next reason is that increasing demands on the grid from electrifying our heating, our hot water, and our vehicles. There's about 3 dozen EVs outside. Is that it puts a strain on the grid, and so getting more and more technologies coming off of fuel and onto electricity is going to put more strain on the grid. So I have a chart here. It's a very simplified chart of kind of what it looks like. Let's see. So this is a very general simplified chart of sort of how the grid uses energy, how we use energy during the day. So overall, you can see this blue line up here shows the overall demand on the grid throughout the day. We've got the time on the bottom here, so you can see kind of around dinner time, around 6 p.m. is sort of when you peak using energy on the grid. So why is this important? We can't use renewables all the time, can't use baseload power all the time, and when you get up into that red zone at the top of this chart here, that's when we start using these what's called peaker plants, these high emitting. They're dirty, they're expensive, sometimes they're really just oil generators to put power on the grid. That's expensive, and that adds cost to all ratepayers, and it's dirty, and it makes a lot of emissions for everyone that likes to breathe air. So what we want to do by having storage is increase the amount of energy that we're using on the bottom there in the blue, which includes a lot of renewables. It does also include nuclear, but that's another conversation. And smooth out this peaky curve here. So we can do that by charging up batteries with renewables, and we can use them instead of using those dirty peaker plants during those peak times. So how do batteries help stabilize the grid? Well, in summary, they serve 2 purposes to meet the state's goals for achieving the modern grid. They can smooth out the peak demand on the grid during those peaky days, and they can provide backup power when it's needed. Some seats up here. So now into batteries 101 here. So what are home batteries? I assume that most people here are interested in batteries for their home. They do also work on a commercial scale. Essentially, they work exactly the same on a commercial scale. The only difference is that instead of looking at something the size of a refrigerator, you're looking at something the size of a shipping container. But we're going to focus mainly on home batteries here. So I've created this slide recently because a lot of people ask how big these things actually are. So I've put them as a approximate size comparison to your average home refrigerator. And all 3 options here, these Enphase ones, the SunPower and the Generac, these are all eligible batteries in the Energy Storage Solutions Program with the Connecticut Green Bank, and they all provide about the same amount of backup power, which is 12 to 18 hours straight if you don't have solar panels, and then more or possibly indefinitely if you have enough solar panels to charge them during the day. So when the grid goes down, of course, you know your house has no power and nothing to run your devices, so home batteries can solve that. Similar to a generator, except it's clean, it's quiet, doesn't make any noise or emissions, and it's just installed in your basement. There's no fuel, there's no maintenance or anything like that, so they just work. The other nice thing about batteries is that you can sell that power back to the grid on days when the grid is up, and you can make some of your money back on your investment in backup power. So part of the Batteries 101, because most residential customers, in fact almost all residential customers to date, have paired their battery with solar panels. What a lot of people don't know, although I'm probably speaking to a pretty educated clean energy crowd here, what a lot of people don't know is that when the grid goes down, your solar panels will not work. So even if it's a sunny day, sun shining, and there was a hurricane last night, your your house will not have electricity if the grid is down. So batteries help solve that. So you can see here on this very rudimentary diagram, we have the PV modules that go into the inverter, that go into your main breaker panel, into the meter, and off to the grid. So when the grid is down, it cuts that connection and it shuts down the PV system. So home batteries will come in at that point, and they will come in between the inverter and the main breaker, and they're your source of backup power, so you can keep the lights on when the power goes out. So next, a little bit on what can home batteries power. So I've got a chart here, and this is a great way, if you're interested in having backup power and having batteries at your home, this is a great way to work with your contractor to figure out what's important to you. I have this chart that's on the vertical axis. You have how essential it is, and again, this will probably be a personal decision to you, whether you view cooking as an important thing, or whether you want to stay cool. So you can determine what's essential and what's not so essential, and what uses a lot of energy and what doesn't use a lot of energy. So of course you have the easy things in the upper left-hand corner, the refrigerator that doesn't really use too much power, charging your phone, keeping some lights on, or a fan. And then going over a little bit more to the right, but still on the top, you've got things that are important, like having a space heater in case the power goes out, or if you have air source heat pumps, or air conditioning in the summertime when it's 100 degrees, if there's a power outage, you definitely want to keep cool. So these are the things that you'll consider when it comes down to deciding how many batteries to install at your home with a contractor. So this is really important for setting your expectations and, most importantly, your budget. Because batteries can power all of these things, and they can power all of these things at once if you have enough of them, but most people don't want to spend $500,000 to fill up their home with batteries so that they can run absolutely everything at the same time. So, we're still talking about backup power, so we're still talking about critical loads. So getting into the incentives here, and to kind of talk about the average and kind of what the average Connecticut homeowner is doing with regards to batteries. We have Energy Storage Solutions, which is a program overseen by PURA, the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority. It's a 9-year program that was created in 2022, and it's managed by the Connecticut Green Bank, Eversource, and UI. So these are utility rebates. They're managed by the Connecticut Green Bank for enrollment. We have a list of eligible contractors, and we have a website, so you can go and you can find a contractor near you that offers batteries. So the goal is to have 580 megawatts, which is quite a lot of battery storage, on the grid by the end of the 9-year program. That's split evenly between commercial and residential. So commercial to date has been pretty successful. For those of you who follow Utility Dive and some of the other energy news, we just issued a press release opening early our next tranche of commercial capacity. So we have an extra 100 megawatts that are coming down the road this year. So we're excited about that. And so for residential, things have been a little bit slower. It's been a little bit slower of an uptake, just in folks and contractors getting access to batteries. I know supply chain has certainly been a top issue on people's minds in the last year or so. So we're just kind of seeing things begin to ramp up here. But we are excited about the next year. So what we're seeing for the average residential customer in the program is you can get $200 to $600 per kilowatt hour of battery capacity for an upfront rebate, up to a maximum of $7,500 per project. What that actually comes out to be for your average person is they do about an 8 kilowatt or 18 kilowatt hour battery, which is similar to the on that refrigerator diagram that I showed earlier. That's about the size of a battery that we're seeing on average. The total cost before any incentives is about $30,000 to $32,000 in total. That's less, anywhere from $3,600 to $5,400 of a rebate for a project like that, for an upfront rebate. And then of course you have a federal tax credit of 30%, which applies to batteries now. It's been increased to 30% as of last summer, last fall, when the IRA passed. So thanks to that, that's increased the average tax credit by a few $1,000s. So when all is said and done, customers can expect to pay, after having 10 years of incentives, I think it's about $15,000 or so. And for having backup power, and essentially for just selling the power back to the grid when you don't need it, it's a decent return for the peace of mind and the comfort and really the convenience of having backup power, where you don't have to buy fuel, you don't have to fire up a generator, you don't have to have maintenance done on motors every year. So we have more to come on this program. Every year we're doing annual updates. We go to PURA with suggestions for things that we can change to increase deployment. So we've got some ideas for this year coming down the road. And we do also have additional incentives. I know it says on here $200 to $600 per kilowatt hour. You're probably asking how you get yourself the higher incentive. We have low income and underserved communities adders. So folks who make below 60% of state median income can actually get $400 per kilowatt hour of battery capacity. And then even more if you live in a grid edge area. So if you live in an area that has more frequent or longer duration power outages, then you can get an additional 50% adder on your upfront incentive. So at the end of the day, if you're looking at your total investment, it's a pretty good move. We have more information that we can direct you to on the website. We have a calculator so you can find more more specifics on finding what kind of incentive you would qualify for. EnergyStorageCT.com. We have a list of contractors, eligible contractors, and of course you can always reach out to us directly if you have any questions. So I know I went through quite a lot pretty quickly, but I do want to save a lot of time for questions because I'm sure there will be some. So Roger, I'm going to pass it over to you now. All right. Thank you.
Get the other thing up here.
Yes.
All right. So you just heard about how to get them and things like that. And again, when Ann and I got our solar panels, we communicated with the Green Bank. Oh yeah, thank you. All right, how's that? When Ann and I got our solar panels, we communicated with the Green Bank. We ended up paying about half of the cost with the federal rebates and so on and so forth. And what I'm going to talk about briefly, this is going to be like 10 minutes of fast mineral economics and batteries and stuff. There's a lot of debate out there about, oh my gosh, if we go to lithium-ion batteries, we're going to be mining the world for lithium. I'm an economic geologist. I've worked in 100 countries around the world. We are already doing that. So what happens in the mineral market when you have an innovation like a battery system is the metals move around and go to the place where people pay the most for them. And that's what's happening to batteries now. So this thing just kind of jumped forward here. Hang on a second. All right, so you know a little bit about batteries. There's two classes. One is primary, and those are the single-use batteries, things you throw away, okay? We're talking about secondary batteries. And in, this computer is not behaving. Okay, there we go. And in a battery, of course, we have the cathode, the positive post, and the anode, the negative post. This is where we're talking about the use of these metals, okay? And the complicated formula of all the, sorry about that, different computers.
Since you hit the space bar, you can pause.
Yeah, it's popping things up like that when I hit the space bar too, so, all right. We'll just go with it. So we have the popular lithium-ion batteries, but there's also solid-state batteries. I'm going to talk very briefly in a minute about the innovations that are happening with batteries, so we don't get hung up on lithium. But one of the things that happens in a battery, as you can see here, a lead acid battery, alkaline battery, those are the ones that have limited use in the long term. And then the secondary batteries. Don't worry about all the equations except the little 2E minus at the end. That's your electricity coming off of a electrochemical reaction. That's how we're making this. And the type of metal you use is really important for that, to get that right. And so when we look at the periodic table, and I have one here that you can take a look at that actually has metals in them, we have lots of choices. I want to briefly talk about a fuel cell, though. A fuel cell is not a battery. It's a direct energy manufacturer. You take hydrogen, combine it with oxygen, and that chemical reaction creates an extra electron, which is your energy, and that produces the energy that goes into the wires. So a fuel cell is a very different kind of operating thing. And one of the things about fuel cells is it requires hydrogen, okay? And hydrogen is essentially all produced from natural gas. So if we look at the advantages and disadvantages of hydrogen, we have to consider that if we are supporting hydrogen now, then we are supporting fracking, drilling, and the fossil fuel industry. That's where we get our hydrogen. In the future, it's possible to make what's called green hydrogen from excess energy from renewable energy. But the interesting thing about electrolysis and water to make hydrogen is that if you take your power from a solar panel, you're going to use 20% more energy to make that hydrogen than if you just use the electricity from the solar panel. So again, we have to think of the big picture as we decide what our energy uses are. And there will be, and is, a hydrogen market. And if you look at this simplified map of the developing hydrogen market, it's very much like what we see in the distribution of natural gas around the world. We can talk more about that later. But these are the metals, the transition metals in green, and the alkali metals over there on the left that we use to make batteries. And the neat thing about some of these metals is that you can use 1,000 combinations to get very high efficiency batteries, and you can use 1,000 combinations and get low efficiency batteries. So what do we do about that? How do we decide? Well, just about every university in the United States and around the world, and research groups, Tesla, GM, all these organizations are working feverishly to crack this problem. So what metals are in batteries? Well, we have oxygen, silicon, aluminum, iron as the four most abundant elements on the Earth's crust, 88% of the Earth's crust, okay? And then we have calcium, sodium, potassium, and magnesium. That's 11% more of those elements. And then we've got titanium and hydrogen and phosphorus, and all the other metals are less than 1%. That's what we're pulling from. So if we're going to make a lead acid battery, okay, that's using one of those less common metals. Magnesium, zinc, copper, and carbon are alkaline batteries. And then we have this lithium thing. Lithium is an amazing metal because it's a small sized atom, so it packs well and you get high energy density from it. We get most of our lithium from South America, China, and there's been a new deposit in India that was just found. So if you think about foreign relations and you want to have a sustainable energy policy, you better get that right. So in that battery, we're looking at an electrochemical reaction, in this case between lithium and magnesium. Those are the common batteries in the cars in the parking lot, as well as iron, lithium and phosphorus, and lithium, carbon, and cobalt. All of these batteries are used in electric cars and for battery walls, power walls, that Ed just talked about. So then we have our NiCad batteries. They're not quite as efficient as lithium batteries, as we'll see in a moment, but they're pulling on cobalt, cadmium, and a host of other metals. In the metal hydride batteries, rare earths, cobalt, manganese, aluminum, vanadium, titanium, chrome, mercury, the list goes on. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood we're not just looking at lithium here. So don't get too worried about that, okay? And we also have aluminum batteries. These are not as efficient, but again, early days, and there's breakthroughs in iron batteries. Remember, iron is one of the most common metals on the planet. And then we have sodium. There's cool breakthroughs happening right now with sodium-ion batteries. So you combine that with magnesium and iron, and you get a battery that is halfway between a NiCad battery and a lithium battery in terms of efficiency. And sodium, salt, NaCl, we get it by evaporating ponds in the ocean. It's a lot cheaper than lithium. And here you can see some salt ponds, and you can say, well, if we're going to support that industry, let's start buying batteries. These take more space, like a container-sized thing, and they're great for grid backup, and they're great for towns and industrial parks. So this is the array of batteries and metals that we're talking about. And to power your house, as Ed said, around our house, everybody's got a diesel or natural gas generator. Well, every week it goes off to make sure that it's still working. If you get a battery like this, you don't need to do that, okay? So we're really looking at the batteries and the efficiencies, the ranges for a car, the hours of backup, and how to integrate batteries, transportation with the grid system, such as this electric-powered truck. So if we look at this chart here, specific energy density on the bottom, the lighter weight, more power demand towards me, and on the y-axis, volumetric energy density, smaller size, higher E demand upward. We want to see batteries that move up this kind of chart and a little bit to the left. The hours of energy are supplied on the top and the right. So where do the batteries I just talked about come in on such a chart? Well, we have those little tiny super capacitors that we see in our computers and things like this. But there's the lead acid battery, there's the nickel cadmium battery, the nickel metal hydride battery with a complex suite of fairly rare elements, the sodium ion battery that I just mentioned, sodium being one of the most common elements on the Earth, and the lithium ion battery that uses a suite of other metals to help boost its efficiency. Then a lithium air battery, which is a newer innovation that doesn't use the typical electrolytic type solution. Fuel cells land up in the upper left, but remember, they're not batteries, those are energy generators. And gasoline is in the upper right. So this is a comparison of where fuel cells, gasoline, and all these other batteries lie. So the innovation is moving us up this chart so that our energy efficiency, and with more purchases and innovation, the cost comes down, the efficiency goes up, and we start moving towards less national defense related metals like cobalt. So we can use these batteries in energy storage, rooftop, EVs, microgrids, aircraft, and second life is really, really important. We're not doing that too much now, it's early days. I want to make a point about cars. People say, oh, electric cars are so heavy because they got batteries in them. Well, look at these cars and the weights, and I just have a Prius up there. I don't have a Bolt or something like that. Let me just go back to that very quickly here. And what I'm showing you here is that these are the miles per gallon, and of course a Tesla, our Tesla, we can go about 320 miles on a charge, and we charge it with our solar panels, so we don't pay anything for electricity. But the weight, you see these smaller cars and mid-sized cars are half as heavy as big pickups and SUVs. That means in those bigger vehicles, you are using twice the amount of natural resources. Twice the amount of natural resources. So when you think of vehicles and you think of how we build houses and how we construct things, you have to look at it holistically so that you balance what is the life cycle carbon footprint with what you're building or producing or driving. All right, so what's a life cycle carbon footprint? Well, right here we have recycling, mining, production, use, secondary use, and recycling. And we would track the carbon dioxide equivalent in all of those stages. And that's one of the things that Ann and I do in our business. And we follow these things. The Green Bank is super aware of this. We're helping write legislation for the General Assembly in Connecticut right now that helps quantify this for the state and for the businesses so that we understand what the best choices are. So part of this is getting people out of the mind frame of I'm just going to use something and throw it away, and thinking about where did it come from, how did it get here, what am I going to use it for, what's it going to be used for next. So say you have a battery in an electric car and it's only 50% efficient. That's fine for a house. In fact, the secondary use for Tesla batteries already is going into homes. That's happening in Arizona, Oregon, New York, California. Also, recycling. Recycling batteries right now is tough because it's an alloy. It's a unique mix of different things, different metals, that makes it very tough to simply say, we're going to take these apart and make new stuff out of them. So we have to keep thinking about that. And along that line, though, the battery manufacturers and the universities are really working out how to make batteries that are recyclable, reusable, and repurposable. Okay? So I want you to know that this kind of stuff is happening at an incredible rate of innovation every single day. Our son works for SpaceX. They're inventing new batteries every moment. So on an environmental side of things, then, if we look at batteries, we go, well, we can't put these toxic metals in every part of our community. Newsflash, we've already done that. If you simply look at what's in your house, with all the metals in your house, all the metals in your car, all the metals in your iPhones and computers and television sets and everything else, in the industrial sector as well. So, but mining is a downside. So if we can go to those more common metals like sodium and iron, we don't have to go into places like Congo, and I worked there, it's horrific. You can make salt right here and get that sodium out of it, and we could have a battery industry in Connecticut making sodium iron batteries out of recycled iron that we can get from the scrapyard sitting in New Haven. So it's pretty cool. Fuel cells, downside to them right now is the hydrogen is made from methane, which is a key greenhouse gas. That's driving climate change and global warming. And we get 68% of our natural gas from fracking the shale basins across the country. So when people say propane is clean, no, it's not. It's greenhouse gas. And it only makes up 0.5 to 3% of natural gas. The rest is methane and other smaller amounts of gases. So you're supporting, I just touched the screen. You're supporting fracking by using those products, even if you don't know you are. Nuclear energy, it's not a zero carbon source either, because you mine uranium, and then we have that big debate about what to do with the waste. And fossil fuels, of course, drilling, extraction, leaks, spills, and emissions. You can go on my YouTube site and watch a talk about that. That'll wake you up. So we have some real challenges in terms of those things. This is moving, I think. There we go. I wanted to just touch on why this is an urgent thing. This goes out to 2100. This is oil and gas reserves. It took me 3 years to make this a few years ago. This is if you're born in 1960, 2000, and 2030, age out to retirement and beyond. This is the real world oil and gas reserves. It doesn't mean it's all gone. It means it gets more expensive every year. Who wants to pay $6,000 for a airline ticket to California or to Cancun? No. That's why Boeing is actually, they've already flown an electric plane with batteries in it. They're moving like crazy on this stuff. So we have what's called the end of oil and the end of gas. It's the end of affordable, easy oil and gas. It's not the end of that hydrocarbon. And we have abundance challenges, 2030, 2050, 2070, 2090. How many of you have grandchildren? When they're 70, if they were born in 2030, we're past all of these points. And we better have these battery systems, renewable energy grids, microgrids, distributed energy. We have to have these. The power companies can see us as partners, not customers. Okay? It's a little bit, speaking heretical in some circles, but there you go. That's what I do. A final diagram I want to show you. And this is a qualitative diagram that I made over 25, 30 years working in the energy and resources business. Renewable energy, biofuels, hydrogen, fossil fuels. Types, details in here. And this is going to be online, so you can see this. Limiters in the market. Climate impacts, health impacts, economic impacts, national security impacts. Why did Russia invade Ukraine? Because Ukraine has two of the largest natural gas fields in all of Europe. That's why Putin did this. It also has ore deposits for more than 20 different strategic metals. He's saying it's territorial stuff, maybe some of that, but he really wants those resources. So what I did is I simply looked at the basics of this, looking at data from the Environmental Energy Information Administration, the USGS, NOAA, and all sorts of different company data. And you can see that impacts in these climate, health, economics, and national security, they get greener toward the top, more poor, bad, and very bad as we go down through the fuels that require fossil fuels. Okay? All of our wars are fossil fuel wars, okay? Which is the Ukraine war as well. And so we really have, if we want a safer world, we have to move up this kind of chart. Okay, that's it for me. So, questions for Ed?
So we have about 10 minutes more, and I'm gonna have to do the hard stop. But if we continue the conversation, room C is a good place to continue our conversation. So go ahead, open them up. I'll let you guys pick.
Yeah, right there.
You talked about batteries for storage, but you didn't talk about things like other ways of storing energy besides batteries.
Sure.
You can
Pump storage is a great one.
What's that?
Pump storage.
Could you just briefly talk about that?
Sure. Pump storage is when you have a reservoir at a higher elevation. When you have a low energy use time of day, you pump water up to it. And then when you have peak demand or high energy requirements, you let that water flow through turbines to create energy. Okay. And it's hard to do in places that we don't have a lot of relief. So you see a lot of these in mountainous areas, less of these things. To do it in a water tower requires really enormous water towers. Yeah.
So you talked a little about battery storage and like, you know, if power cuts, you can use it. Can you also use it, and kind of two questions. One, can you also use it like to do every day? So you use like, you know, 100 watts of power every day and your battery storage is 20 watts. Can you use that and reduce your power by 20%? And then if you wanted to go, call it off grid, whether you're not physically cut or not, you gave an estimate of like 30K for an average household to buy the system. If you went off grid, what would that average be? Would it be 100K? You know, if you can give those two numbers.
Yeah. So the one for going off grid, we've seen a couple of homes that have installed, 16 or so battery system. I mean, spending a $250,000. I think it certainly depends on how much you consume at home. If you wanted to completely offset your grid usage, you would really want to do that with solar panels. So solar would be the first step in pairing that. So you would want to plan for your worst solar day of the year, if you want it to be, quote unquote off grid. So if, on a cloudy winter day, your solar panels can produce, I don't know, let's say 10 kilowatt hours in the full day, you would want to be able to have enough battery to hold that to carry you through, maybe a few days. So that would be, you'd probably be looking at like 50, 60 kilowatt hours, which is, almost triple. You're getting into like the six-figure territory to do something like that. And then, I'm sorry, could you repeat your first question?
So if you have a battery, use the average when you had, say, it was 20% of your load or something like that, your power load get cut down by 20% because you use that battery before you buy from the grid.
So the way it works is when you have solar panels and you have a netting tariff or you have a net metering agreement, all the power that comes out of the battery at some point. So even if it goes to feed your home's load, it'll kind of work the same way that solar panels do, where your home will use it when you need it, and then if your battery is dispatching to the grid because the utility called on it, say for a day like a hot summer day with high grid demand, it'll go through your net meter, so it'll be counted just the same way as solar. There might be a little bit of an efficiency loss because it had to go from panels into the battery, but generally about the same.
Recently, we've seen a number of fires with these lithium-ion batteries, and how do you fight them?
That's a great question. Well,
You have to smother them completely. So instead of using PFAS, which are toxic, carcinogenic, and we're passing laws not to use those, they're coming out with, depending on the size, systems of, in essence, like smothering with fireproof blankets. They do need oxygen to burn, and the safety regulations for lithium batteries are actually fairly intense. Federally, you can't. There was a proposal in Stonington for a battery storage system, and I wrote a paper for Stonington on that because the safety is there, and they're actually safer. There are fires, but they are actually safer than using natural gas. So you kind of got to weigh.
My question is not how safe it is, how do you put it out?
Yes, you smother it.
You can't do it with water.
No, you can't do. That's why they're coming up with these ways to entirely cover it and blanket it. It's a problem. It's a problem. But if we go to sodium batteries or if we go to iron batteries, which are much stabler, much safer, then we get away from some of those problems. That's why I showed you all those metals. Yeah.
I just want to add one thing. So in our battery storage program, we do require every piece of equipment to go through UL 9540 testing, which is like a battery safety. So often when you see a battery fire, like if you see it in the news, I don't know, recently there was one in the Bronx, I think. Those come from like scooters and vape pens and like Jeep batteries that don't go through any sort of training, don't have overcharge protection. So we do take safety very seriously in the program though. So, we do want to make sure that they meet all of the UL and IEEE requirements. Okay, there.
On the battery safety and fire lithium, any comments on detecting the off gases? So that if you get a fire, if they start off gassing, you know about it before you actually get a fire.
That's in the regulations. So there's sensors that go on the battery containers that detect that.
Is there anything available for the residential market that you know?
That I don't know. That I don't
That's
know.
what I can find out.
Yeah, that I don't know.
How efficient are the shingle forms of solar panels?
We do actually have a solar discussion at noon. So, but the solar shingles are generally, for one shingle, they're like 5 to 15 watts, whereas a large solar panel is 300 to 400 watts. Space-wise, they're not as efficient, but aesthetically, some people prefer them.
So another way to put that is, some of the solar panels are 22% efficient, okay? And a shingle is between 10, 12, 14% right now. But again, they're working on it daily, so. Yeah.
What's the life expectancy of a solar field or panel you might have at your home? And what do you do to dispose of it after it's served its life?
You or me? Well, you got an answer?
On solar panels?
Disposal?
Well, I'll
Okay.
let you take disposal.
So, solar panels are, the ones they're making now look like 20, 30-year type life things. And recycling is a problem because there's not a market to recycle these because the industry relatively is new. So that's an area we don't have a good answer for you. So, long life though, 20, 30 years.
Yeah, but what happens at the end? How do you get rid of it?
Yeah, well, that's what we're working on right now.
Well, what do you do today?
Oh, what do you do today? Well, that's a question for this afternoon because Earthlight is down the hall and all of that. Yeah.
Okay.
You got a question back here?
Oh, yeah. For someone considering battery systems right now, like, what's your advice in terms of cost? Like, you're talking about a new battery coming online. Are the costs expected to decline over time, and what would be an optimal time to discuss this?
The costs are coming down. Can you address that better, maybe?
So actually, we've seen costs not really come down much and actually come up a little bit in the last 2 years. It's mainly due to supply issues and labor issues. But just like with any technology, you can always wait for the better one because it's always going to be getting better. But it's up to you to decide, when to actually go ahead and install it because if you need it now, you need it now, or if you want it now, you want it now. Same thing with EVs or iPhones. But for right now, I think I said the average cost is about $30,000 before incentives and about $15,000 when you account for everything in there. I guess it's really just a personal preference on timing.
I'd get them as soon as possible.
For the cost, like, right now we have vehicle to grid, vehicle to everything. There are some cars on the market. Is there a reason why you wouldn't just buy a car and park it in your driveway and always leave it plugged in? It seems like it's a third of the cost of the battery pack.
Yeah, I know. EVs are almost like you buy a battery and you get a free car with it. But so for incentives though, it's different with vehicle to grid. We're not really there yet because we need batteries to be reliably plugged into the grid at certain times to be able to be called on to provide grid services. Also, if you're running your house on it, it's going to be cycling that battery a lot, which puts it through some more durability issue. But yeah, that is a good point.
I mean, the home batteries, it seems like they're very expensive relative to like a car battery. They're much cheaper than a car.
Yeah, but the car, this is called V2G and H2G, house to grid, vehicle to grid. If we integrate all those like you're talking about, then you have an integrated system and everything can play off each other. And also, if everybody had solar panels on their house and are connected to the grid, and if we had them in industrial parks and on canopies over parking lots, we don't need to build new power plants. See? So we have another cost savings for for your power bill.
One more question.
So, okay, I guess I'm like that at the last one. So, my question is, we have lead acid batteries right now. You can go down to Home Depot and buy yourself a lead acid battery. Why don't we just buy big lead acid batteries, deep cycling batteries, green batteries? Use that.
They do.
Yeah, people have been doing that for
There's a
decades.
lot of people that have those. A friend of mine has his, he's off grid, and he has a little shed with 30 lead acid batteries in it that run his whole home.
Right.
So people do that all the time.
Those batteries do. So if you're talking about like for our incentive program, we don't admit any of those types of lead acid.
I understand
Okay.
that, but I'm buying batteries.
It's a battery.
Both.
It's a battery.
Yeah.
It's a battery.
I buy Interstate or some other battery, deep cycle, $250, 900 cranking amps. Okay. I buy 10 of those, it's $2,000. That's a lot of energy stored in those cans.
And people are doing that.
Yeah, and
Not
back
so-
with the
it
incentives,
works.
you know,
It's a battery, as you saw in that chart, it's not as efficient as some of the others, but it's cheaper.
I understand, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper, not even considering the incentives, right? And the six.
Well, yeah.
You could have those in your garage, not worry about them catching fire.
Why don't more people do that?
I think it's just state of mind. We're used to plugging in the grid, and a lot of people just don't. We don't think about power. We just take it for
Use your
granted.
microphone, please.
Oh, yeah. We don't tend not to think about power. It's like climate change. People say, "Oh, it's not going to affect me because it's more than a week, a month, a year, or 5-year plan." And same with energy. We turn the light on and everything's good. I get my bill, I pay it. We're not used to thinking about the holistic energy system in our home and how it impacts our community and our state and our country. And that's a change in thinking.
And we're gonna have to finish up here. From my 2 cents, I think that the economics of it, I think it's great that you say, well, we can do this with this lead iron batteries. However, there's an inconvenience factor to that. And I think industry sort of presses on convenience. And I think that's the idea, is the more we have that conversation, the more that people will say, well, we could do this with a battery storage system. And the industry says, yeah, but we need to make a more efficient one, a better one, a more effective one, a more cost-effective one. And then it becomes a tipping point where all of a sudden, yeah, that's the smart thing to do.
Right, but I can do this tomorrow by myself. I don't.
You can do it.
And do
Yeah.
it.
But generally, the homeowner wants to get the convenience. I want the convenience of it. So I'm waiting to get a better
Use
battery.
up those batteries and you get to do it again.
Anyway, thank you all very, very much. Next session's at 11 o'clock here and also downstairs. Thank you so much.